We're here again to talk about the flamethrower, which we have talked about before, some of its bugs, and I'll link that video up in the video card in the corner there. But today, the difficulty is going to be math. So we start with 450 units of fuel, and we're in the unofficial patch 11.3 basic for no reason. I just happen to be here. But one of the things we do have is we have 450 units of fuel, which is 50% more than you have in the original game. You have 300 in the original game. And I believe the reason for that is the myth around this flamethrower is that on modern computers, you can't press the button fast enough to do the damage you could on older computers, so to compensate for that, they've given you more fuel in the basic patch. And in the plus patch, I believe you have 700 units of fuel. I'm not sure what the logic behind that is. Maybe just to make the fight easier with a lot of fuel. But getting ahead of myself, let's go talk to Meg.
You've become a grave disappointment, Kindred. This was not meant to be
grave disappointment? Yep, I've heard that before.
You were never more than a pawn, Kindred.
Never more than a pawn, heard that.
Boundaries on your horizon. It was I who sensed in you the power to right the balance of this city. It will give me no joy to bring you final death.
Okay, never heard that part. But I have said this part.
You will have time to ponder this folly as you are devoured by worms and disease in the hell of burrowing maggots. 1,000 years shall you suffer.
Oh my, so poetic. And emotional. So here's where our math comes in. I pressed the button and we used 53 units of fuel. So I think I'm too close here. I need to back up. And, so the thing about this is I'm kind of the exploit here is that I'm too far away to trigger her lunge and I'm too close to trigger her melee attack. Okay, so she changed it up on me there. And when I pressed that button, it did a fixed amount of damage to Ming. But of course, that fixed amount of damage is variable, as it is every time you press the attack button. But my point is, it isn't... my point that I'm trying to make is I used 53 units of fuel, and the units of fuel don't have any correlation at all to the damage that it does. Like, the damage it does is just a function of pressing the button once, and the amount of fuel that you use is a function of whatever the frame rate of your computer is. The frame rate of your computer probably isn't the root cause. The root cause might be some timer or something on some piece of hardware. I really don't know, but as a symptom, we can look at the frame rate and it reflects the change. So if I press the button again and I use 53 again, we're going to end up with 44. And the whole myth is that on the modern computers, you can't press the button fast enough. And so that's why it's so much more difficult. But that's completely true. If I press the button and it comes to 44. The pressing the button isn't a function of skill or how fast the person does it or how sensitive it is or anything else. The frames per second, if we just enter this without a parameter, it gives us the number it's supposed to be locked at is 65 frames per second. And if we CL show frames per second. We can see that it is kind of bouncing around up there. So you might get some variability up there of maybe a unit or two because it's bouncing around 61, 64, 65, 62, blah, blah, blah. But we can reload our weapon here, and I forget, 97, is that what we're looking for? And oh, and I do want to stand her up like that and stop her from swinging. Especially, it's especially helpful if you're trying to get in this range to stand here where she can't do any damage. Plus, I think it gives you an extra burning damage. Okay, so that's problematic. Normally, okay, I got away with it. Normally, after she hits you with that, you'll end up out of range, and you'll have to move again to cancel her damage. Anyway, she moved again. Anyway, so yeah, I'm gonna have to move again. Do I have enough fuel? Anyway, I was saying it's a function of your frames per second, so we can just turn this up to the default, and I predict that it will use at the maybe we shouldn't do that. Let's do something like, let's just do this. Maybe this would be more interesting. So we just doubled the frame rate. Don't spit at me, don't hit me. We just doubled the frame rate there. So the prediction was we were using 53 before, so we should be using 106 now. Although I do know this isn't a linear function. And we used 101. And although it isn't a linear function, it isn't non-linear enough that it'll give you a good guess as to how much fuel you use. So we can reload again. Oops, that isn't reload. We can reload again. And you see our, when I did that, our health bar went away like that. So I did a bunch of investigation about this frames per second and decided that it should be locked to 60. And at that time, the unofficial patch had it locked to 92. I don't know why it was locked to 92. But as we can see that locked to 92, it was using more fuel than old computers would, which older computers back in the day would have probably been running locked to 60 or limited to 60. Vertical sync would have been set mostly. And most monitors probably would have been locked to that vertical sync. But of course, some computers back then, would have not been able to make the 60 because they're just too weak. And that's sort of where we run into problems today, because people will play this on their laptops and they have computers that are too weak, and they'll end up at lower than 60, and they'll say, man, the flamethrower decimates me. So we can do that. We'll set it to 30. We have 137. What do we predict this? We'll say half of 53, so we'll say 27, so 110. 112, close enough. But you get the idea. So people that have laptops or something, or they're streaming and they run into trouble, they'll say, man, this flamethrower, because now we just can sit here and press this button forever. Many, many, many attacks on her. And you know, the whole myth about pressing the button fast and you're just not fast enough, that's your problem. It's not true at all. Is there any... Oh, yeah, so there is one other thing to say. Well, actually, I lost track of what I had said previously. So I'll just go back and I'll put this back to the way that I normally play the game. And I don't know if that's useful, but I'll do it anyway. I'll be back. So we're back. I'll give her a squirt, and we used 51 units of fuel. So we expect our frame rate to be locked at around 60, or somewhere around 60. But it's not. It's set to the default. And if we press it again, same result. 51 units of fuel. Why is that? Well, as I said, this is the way I used to play. And it has to do with, in the old days, the whole FPS max thing wasn't really important because the vertical sync use, for most everybody, the vertical sync would take care of locking that. Probably some people would go in and unlock their vertical syncs and gamers and such things. But even then, I doubt if gamers had... I doubt if the average gamer had enough hardware to... well, I don't actually have any idea. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is that in the old days, you could lock your... It was typical to lock your vertical sync. That was kind of the default, and that's, for years, that's the way I played this game. And I never had any issues, or I never knew anything about the feet per sec max. But when I went to Windows 10 and I loaded OBS, even if you have your vertical sync locked, as it used to be, OBS defeats that. So to get this working in this way, you know, it takes actually a bunch of messing around and defeating what this program wants to do, or this driver wants to do by default, and so on and so forth. So in terms of that, the landscape has changed. And so pretty much you can't rely on vertical sync anymore to be useful, which is why the whole FPS max thing is important now. I don't think the whole argument about fast computers and not being able to press the button fast enough has any truth at all. Hopefully the whole math thing and showing the frames and going through all the examples proves that out. I hope that's clear, and I hope that covers everything. The whole thing is very confusing. I'm sorry about that. But hopefully I've covered everything. If you have any questions, or I haven't covered anything, or you think I've said something wrong, of course, let me know. And thank you for watching.